Hey.
Hey, how are you?
My camera's a mess. Hold on. Okay. All right, good. How are you?
Good. How's the connection? Can you hear me?
Connection's great. I can hear you. Yay. You look
Yay.
good. Look at you. You're looking diesel. You working out?
Oh yeah, every day.
That's good. Every day. All right, you ready?
Totally.
All right. Hold on a second. I got okay, there we go. Okay. All right, here we go. Ready? 3, 2, 1. What is up, everybody? Brian Mendler back in your life on another edition of the podcast. And today I am super excited to be joined by a girl who's doing a lot of stuff, right? So I was going to say this, not going to sound right. I was going to say I was checking you out, but that would be a bad thing to say, right? So what I was going to say is I was researching you. You've got a new book out called Be the Flame, right? Which I love the title. You're an Instagram star. You're a coach for teachers. So it's exciting. I'm excited to have you. Shane Saeed, good to see you. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Brian. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good to see you. So tell a little bit about those things. Where do you want to start? How about we start with the book? I love the title, Be the Flame. Where did that come from?
Oh, thank you. So that was actually coined from a phrase my dad used with us growing up with all of our siblings. So essentially, he always told us to be the flame in other people's lives. So whether that means that we step up as a leader, we have a positive impact on others, we are kind and compassionate and draw others in, we were constantly told to be the flame. So when Jimmy Cassis reached out and was like, hey, I kind of want you to write this book or write a book for us. What do you want to write on? I was like, I think I know what I want to write on and what I want to call it. Called my dad and was like, how do you feel about me using Be the Flame as the title for this book? And he was pumped. So it was great.
I love the title. And so you talked about your dad and your brothers and sisters. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up south of Denver, and my dad's so he immigrated here from Iran during the revolution. So I'm half Persian.
Oh, cool. So tell about that a little bit. I'm interested to hear how did he get here? Like, what happened? How did that happen?
So in the 80s, Iran went through a really huge government revolution, and the Shah fell and a theocracy came to be. And it wasn't necessarily, my dad had 4 sisters, and it wasn't necessarily a place that they wanted to raise 4 girls. And it wasn't necessarily the place that was as welcoming as it once was. And so my grandfather had actually gotten 2 degrees, both at Colorado School of Mines and at UC Berkeley, I believe, for engineering. And so they'd been in the States a few times, and they decided to immigrate here. It was, flee, but they immigrated here in order to escape that.
Wow. That's interesting. So had you were obviously born here. Do you still have family in Iran though?
We don't. So everyone is here.
That's cool, right? That's good, I guess.
Yes.
Nice and interesting. So what did you grow up a good student? Did you like school? What was school a thing that was good for you, or what got you into wanting to be a teacher?
So that's a great question. In my book, in the first chapter, it's a reflection of the teachers that I had that were flames in my life. And I was not the student that was there for academics. I, didn't really care much for my academics. I knew that it was important, and I, did enough to do well, but I was there to socialize. I was there to see my friends, and I was there to build relationships. And so the teachers that I worked the hardest for were the teachers that had relationships and took the time to get to know me and build relationships with me. And so I actually didn't know I wanted to be a teacher until senior year of high school, when everyone was talking about where they were going to college and what they were going to major in, because they were going to be neuroscience or neurosurgeons and chemical engineers. And they're like, Shane, what are you going to be? And I was like, I don't know. So they were like, well, what do you like to do? Like, well, I love my job as a day camp counselor. I love working with kids, and maybe that's what I can do. I can work with kids. And that was the moment where I was like, I should look into education. And from there, I haven't looked back.
Yeah. And so fourth grade, I know that's kind of was your thing. Did you teach anything other than fourth grade before fourth grade, or was fourth grade where you started?
Fourth grade's where I started, and fourth grade as a general education teacher is kind of where I ended too. So not to say it's the last end all be all, but fourth grade has kind of been my niche.
So you said started and ended. How long did you teach fourth, and what are you doing now?
So I taught fourth for 7 years, and now I've stepped into an instructional coaching role in my district, and it's partnering with educators and administrators to work on instructional practices. We have a really big literacy initiative that was rolled out. And so I'm basically here as a think partner and co-teacher for teachers at the buildings that I'm at in order to help support them with this big, huge initiative, and, work with them on their literacy practices.
So when you say work with them on literacy practices, your job really is to work on helping the teachers help kids teach literacy, which I guess also along with that comes relationships, right? Because that always goes with everything, right? Relationships is kind of like hot sauce, I always say, right? You can put it on everything and it always makes everything better, right? For me, hot sauce does that. I don't know if you're are you a hot sauce person?
Yes, I am.
You are?
Yeah.
So I've got this thing where I travel a lot, and everywhere I go, I collect hot sauces from every city that I go to. So I have a collection of I don't even know, 200 different hot sauces. Pretty cool. I know, put on everything. But so how do you do that? What's your process for helping teachers, not just with literacy, but with also connection and building relationships?
So I will say, this is month 2. Not even, I think I've officially been in this role for 1 month. So I'm still learning and growing in this capacity. So for me to say, oh, I do this and it works really well, it would be kind of silly. But from what I've seen, it's a lot of questioning and a lot of, it's cognitive coaching. So, I can't necessarily consult and be like, have you tried this? Have you done this? It's, well, how do you feel about this? Or how might you leverage that relationship? Or how might we look at this data and what does it tell us? Or what does this data tell us about what students know and what students don't know yet? And how can we take the don't know yet and, just figure out how to ensure that we're giving students those skills?
Yeah. One of the things that I think is really important as a consultant, which is kind of what I do, is to show people, and I think this is true as a teacher as well, with kids, but to show people how it's in their best interest to do something, right? A lot of times I think especially as teachers, I think sometimes we make the mistake of trying to convince a kid to do something like do your work. Why? Well, because it's going to make your test grade better, versus showing them how this is something that at some point in your life, you're going to be really able to use, and it's going to improve and benefit you. And I think when we do that, we get much better buy-in.
Oh, definitely. It's that, the buy-in, like you said, it's the intrinsic motivation to want to do better or to take ownership of what's happening or the work that we're doing. And if it's not our ownership, it's really easy to point at someone else and say, well, that was your idea and it didn't work. So, I'm not using it again, or I don't want to try and improve on it. I want to, try something completely different. So it's really important, as you said, to have that buy-in.
Right. And to get people willing, right? People have to be willing to want to change and want to get better. And I always find that's often the hardest part, is that willingness. And once that willingness is there to improve, which is, I think should be the goal always for everybody, right? In every situation. That's what I say to my own kids, right? Just the goal is to get better. Just be better tomorrow than you were today. Read one more paragraph tonight than you did last night. And if you're able to do that, I think that's a pattern that will make you successful for your life.
Oh, definitely. And especially as educators, we are lifelong learners. We are wanting to continue to grow. That is why we've stepped into this role, or I hope that we've stepped into this role so that we can model that growth as well.
So you have a huge following on Instagram. How did that come to be? I'm pretty sure you didn't grow up saying, I want to have a big following on Instagram, right? So like, how did that come to be? And like, what do you do to maintain that?
So that's kind of built up over time. I started my first Instagram my teaching Instagram, I think it was 2016. So about 5 years ago. And it was because I was moved out of the building and into a portable classroom. And we were slotted to have about 32 students in this really tiny portable classroom. And my grade level partners we were trying to think about how to fit all of these students comfortably while also being able, we were a movement school. We wanted them to be able to get up and move. And we looked a lot into flexible seating and did a lot of research and decided that we were going to take the plunge and implement flexible seating into the classroom, which saves space and allows students to get up and move. And on top of that, I've done so much more research since then, and it is not only great for that, but it's great for student agency and engagement, et cetera.
Yeah.
Like I could talk forever about flexible learning space.
Hey, go for it.
Maybe we will.
Yeah, no, I'm a fan too. I mean, I think it's fantastic. My kids went to Montessori school last year, and they, so it's interesting because we just moved to Florida. We lived in New York. We now live in Florida, and they went to Montessori in New York, and now they're in regular school, public school in Florida. And my daughter, especially, it's been a challenge for her because she's in a regular classroom with desks now, and she doesn't even know what to do. She's like, Dad, like she never had a desk before. Literally, they had like benches and bean bags and like just all like it was more like a living room at Montessori than it was like a traditional classroom, which for her was great. She's adjusting, but it's definitely a lot different.
Oh, it is. And then, I think the agency piece is just so big, and research shows that increase in student agency supports student engagement. So if we're trying to get them to engage and, like we talked about before, buy in and intrinsically motivate themselves for their work, we should be creating a space where they are a part of, it's their space. It's not my space and you're sitting in it. It's our space. So we decided to jump into flexible seating. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to, I see these cute little teacher Instagrams. I'm going to document this change. And so I decided to start it that summer. I was, gathering so many things, hitting up garage sales, Craigslist, trying to find as many free items as I could and tables and types of seating. And I was just so excited when there was like 5 people that were liking my pictures. I was like, these 5 people I don't even know, and they like my picture. This is amazing. So it just kind of grew from there. And I think I set out not to have followers. I set out just to share my journey. I didn't even know what I wanted to do with it. I just was like, yeah, sure, I'll keep up with this. And for the first year, I think you realize during the school year how difficult it is to continue to keep up with posting and storying. And so that first year it kind of fell flat. And then the next summer I was like, okay, I'm going to try and share more ideas, because I think I have some fun ideas that people might like.
Right.
And it's grown since then. And I think a lot of it is just, I try really hard to be, I hate self-defining, but I work, people are like, I'm authentic. It's like, let's be authentic.
Right.
But I try really hard to just keep it real, authentic, post regularly, and then be helpful. So it's not me.
Right. And I think what you said earlier is really to me that what jumps out, which is that you never set out to have followers. And I think that's the most important concept, is that it's got to be about having something to share, right? Have something important, have something useful. I've Kayla, probably Kayla Dornfeld, who's a good friend of mine, and she's been on my show a few times. And, we talk about flexible seating a lot. She's like one of the pioneers, with flexible seating. And she talked about that and, with hers. And she was like, you know what, it was just, I was sitting in Starbucks and I was thinking to myself, why I'm enjoying this. Like, I love Starbucks. I love taking out my computer and sitting down and wanting to work. Why do I like working here more than I like working at home? And, looking around and seeing the different shapes and the different kinds of places to sit. And she was like, if I could take this model and bring this to my classroom, maybe I'll get a bunch of kids who aren't that interested in reading to want to start reading, and a fascinating concept. And then she said same thing. And so then, I started sharing a little bit about what I was doing and people started paying attention. And, but I think that's really the foundation, is having something of quality to share. And I think that's the cool thing about teaching is I think we all do. I think everybody has something cool to share. It's just take your daily basis. What do you do on a daily basis? And just sort of start documenting it, which that's work though. That is work.
It is extra work. And I don't think my partner jokes about how my, social media and like that part of my life is like a second job. He's like, you have this part-time job of, documenting things and so on. I'm like, I have to create this post, or I have to think through this, or, I'm thinking about this story. It takes time because you want it to be meaningful, but it also, I love what you said about, what are you doing every day in your classroom? I talk about so Be the Flame is broken up into chapters of building relationships in different realms of education. And one of those chapters is how do you build your PLN? How do you build your professional learning network via social media? And how do you start sharing? And it was like, you have something to share every single day because you're doing the work every single day. What did you do that day? What were your reflections? What worked? What didn't work? A lot of times teachers like to know what didn't work.
Totally.
It humanizes us as well, on top of shows that we can be reflective. And so then when you say, well, this didn't work, so I'm going to try this next time, that idea might help someone else for implementing a similar idea within their own classroom.
It's so interesting that you say that, because for me as a teacher, I did a lot of special ed, right? So I was a special ed guy, and it was primarily self-contained, but I also did a lot of inclusion. And that's what, truthfully, and I know you don't like self-defining, I don't either, but truthfully, that's what made me good. What made me good was the inclusion, because I got to work with all these different teachers in a given day, right? And watch, what is this one doing that this one isn't doing, right? And it was a fascinating thing to see, and I say this all the time, like, I never met a teacher in my years that didn't try in some way to build relationships. Like, I think every teacher, like if you go up to any teacher and say, do you try to build relationships with kids? They all say yes. Okay. But then I would go in these classrooms and I would watch the difference, right? Like where it would, so first period, I go in a room and, every teacher would say to the kids, how was your weekend? Every teacher. I never met a teacher who didn't on a Monday say, how was your weekend? Right. And you know how the kids are, good, fine, boring. It was
one
okay.
Word.
Right. One word. Right. And then so teacher A, great. Everyone turn to page 15 in your books. Teacher B, really? Great. What'd you do? No way. Where'd you go? Really? Who were you with? Oh, how long did it take you to get there? No way. Who drove you? Really? She did. Where did you stop to eat? What'd you get? Right? What'd you put on it? You did? What flavor do you like? Right. And 20 minutes later, the teacher would be like, oh my gosh, you guys, we got to get some math done. Right. And this, it would almost be like they were there for this connection versus being there for the math. Right. And I would watch this, I'd kind of be in the back a lot of times and watch this and say to myself, that's the key, right? The key to being able to teach math is being willing to have a 15-minute conversation with them about what they did this weekend. You know what I mean? And it was so fascinating to see.
Oh yeah. Well, and it's funny. It could even be like, hey, on Friday, you said you were going to do this. How'd that go? And it's all of a sudden the student's like, wow, you remembered what I told you on Friday and you're following up on that. Like that's huge to them.
Huge.
I just finished reading, or I'm not finished. I'm almost done reading Dare to Lead by Brene Brown.
Yeah.
And she talks a lot about how trust is built, not necessarily in big moments, but in really small moments. And she uses the analogy of a marble jar. And every single time someone remembers something really small but significant to you, you put a marble in their jar of, I can be more vulnerable with you. I can trust you. And as teachers, we're constantly trying to build those those relationships with those tiny moments of seeing our students and hearing them and following up with them and knowing about them as individuals. And you also said, so although in fourth grade for 7 years, 2 of those years, I had was the cluster teacher. So I had all the students with IEPs in my classroom.
Oh, cool.
In the grade level. And it was an amazing experience because I got to co-teach with our special education teacher, who then pushed in rather than, and she did some pull out, but we were able to really bounce ideas off of each other. And I grew as an educator, like exponentially, just because I had this other experience with having a large population of students who needed significant support. And I had another educator to be like, ooh, that lesson didn't quite land. What did you think? How can we make it better for next time? What do you think? Let's try that. Okay. That worked, but this piece didn't work. How can we change it for next time? It was incredible.
Right. And, and I always found that when it came to inclusion, or like, I think you called it cluster teaching, right? Like, I always found like it was all about the relationships between the adults, and like, do people trust each other? Like, do I trust you to do your job? And then do you trust me to help you? Like, I would oftentimes say to a regular ed teacher, hey, listen, with this kid, we can't give him this test. Just so you know, there's no chance we're giving him this test. Like, we got to take off these 5 questions, and we're only doing 1 essay instead of 2. And having the teach, no problem, got it, right? Or totally understand versus, well, wait a minute. Like, if we do that for that one, do we have to do that for this one? And I always felt like trusting each other and learning from each other was always the key.
Oh, definitely. Assuming that positive intent is so important. And when I decided to be the cluster teacher, I already had this really great relationship with that special educator that was co-teaching with me. And it was still scary to have her come in my room and watch me teach. We were already friends, and I was still worried. So it doesn't go, it gets easier with time. And I think we as we worry about feedback, but we should constantly be looking for feedback. And once we get used to asking for it and taking it in and reflecting on it, the easier it becomes to not only ask for it and reflect on it, but to take it in and just be like, you can take it with a grain of salt sometimes, and sometimes it's going to completely change your craft.
But if the thing is, it's so interesting you say that, because watching yourself work, for me, I'll speak for myself. Watching myself work is the most nauseating thing in my life. I hate it, right? I promise you there's nobody more critical of me than me, right? I say this to teachers all the time. Like, I know you teach a lot, but how much time do you spend watching yourself teach, right? Because that's what will make you a great teacher, right? Have your colleagues come in, record you, and have a date with yourself on Saturday night, right? Where you just sit down and you will want to vomit for 45 straight minutes, right? You'll be like, ew, like, why do I look like that? And oh my gosh, I should never wear that color again. And why do I have 3 chins when I turn this way? And oh, I only called on the people on the right. I didn't, like, you'll literally get to the point where you'll never need an administrator to evaluate you again, because you'll pick yourself apart. And I think that's often why we don't do it, right? I think a lot of times we don't do it is because it's uncomfortable. And in life, we often run from discomfort, right? Discomfort is one of those things that we kind of see and we're like, let me get away from that. And I actually think discomfort's something to embrace, right? Embrace the discomfort, like hug it, hang out with it, marinate in it. You know what I mean? Let yourself feel it. And the thing is, when you push yourself through discomfort, it almost always makes you better on the other side.
Oh, definitely. And I think about a few years ago, I decided to post myself teaching like very specific lessons on Instagram when they just rolled out IGTVs, and not with any students. Like, you could only see me in the board. That was vulnerable. And you get a lot of feedback from a lot of different people that have, this is a snapshot of one single thing. And a lot of times I was, my co-teacher and I would be like, yeah, let's just film this one. Let's see how it goes.
Yep.
And you learn a lot, like you said, about yourself as an educator. And I think people don't understand that when you then also post it publicly, how vulnerable that is as an educator as well, putting yourself out there of like, so this is something I did. Yep. What do you think? And it's not just a picture.
Yeah. And that's why we should all be required to do it. We should all be required to do it because it's so uncomfortable but it makes you better. And I think that's not just emotional, it's also physical, right? Like, that concept of discomfort being, one of the slides I have in my workshop is called Discomfort is the Appetizer for Growth, because whatever it is in this world, you can't, and that's true physically and emotionally, right? Like, you know, a good workout, like it's uncomfortable. It's annoying a lot of times while you're going through it, but usually on the other side of it, you're like, thank God I pushed myself through that. Or, you know, I love working out early in the morning and I don't like it when I don't enjoy getting out of bed to work out. I do not enjoy that. But once I'm through it and I'm the whole day, I'm like, right. I feel so much better about myself that I pushed myself through that early discomfort, you know?
Definitely. And I think in the world right now, like we need to be leaning into discomfort and like, why is something making us uncomfortable? And then lean into that discomfort of, I need to reflect on that more, because obviously I'm having a reaction to this and I need to figure out why. Is it because of my own, what like my values are and what I think, and that, you know, pushes against my values, especially as educators. I don't know about you, but everyone, because they've had an experience with education, thinks that they are an expert in education when they are not educators. And so it's really difficult to sometimes have those conversations with people when they don't want to feel uncomfortable about the changes in education that are happening. And you're like, so let's talk about this. I know it's uncomfortable because it's different and it's change.
Right. Totally. Well, did you have any of those moments when you were writing your book? Did you have any moments like where you were writing, where you were kind of like, ooh, I don't know if I want to say this, or I don't know if I want to tell this story, or, you know, I'm thinking about something I want to write and I'm like, I'm reliving it in my mind. Did you have any of those moments?
Yeah, a few times. I actually, so in the introduction, I prefaced the entire book. When you put something in print, it's really scary because it lives on forever.
Yeah.
And I didn't want this to be like end all be all, these are my values and they are never changing. And so in the introduction, I discuss how, you know, we as educators are constantly, as we talked about, growing and evolving. And this is something that I believe and value now. Some ideas might have an expiration date and some ideas might be timeless. And I can't tell you that I'm going to, you know, hold fast to every single thing that's in this book over time, because my hope is that I would be growing as an educator and evolving. And sometimes that means changing our values. So that was one thing that I struggled with, you know, this being so concrete and forever. And then there's also a lot of anecdotes that are woven in through the practical ideas, so that, you know, educators can see that this was the practical idea and this is how it supported my learning or supported students or et cetera. And there were times where, you know, it involved maybe another staff member. Like I have a section on building relationships with teams and coworkers. And I talk about having direct, courageous conversations. And that's not my strong suit. I am working on it, but it's not my strong suit. And I had a very specific story that I was going to share. And I realized that, like, I don't know if that's necessarily my story to share because it did involve someone else. And it's not a growth story. It just kind of feels hard to discuss. And I didn't want to make that person uncomfortable too.
So of course, now I'm going to ask you, what was that story? Because how could I not? But so I'm curious about it. Like, what was you don't have to tell me the names or anything, but what was the sort of thing that you were thinking about sharing? And because, by the way, there's always a way to do that. You just got to, there's times that I think it's best to just pretend. And what I'll always do is, a lot of times in my workshops, if I'm not sure if someone's going to like an idea or a strategy, if it's my idea, I'll pretend it's someone else's, right? So I'll say, a third grade teacher that I used to work with, let me tell you what she did. And that way, if they don't like the idea, I'm like, well, it wasn't mine, it was theirs. If they like the idea, I'm like, well, even better. I gave credit to someone else if people like that better anyway. So I'm curious, like, what was the foundation of that?
There was a miscommunication between me and another staff member about a club outside of school. So we were both helping with this club. There was a miscommunication about timing, and, you know, essentially this person thought that I had gone to our boss and said, you know, this person's not coming on time.
Oh, I thought you were tattling.
Yeah. And we hadn't, because I'd actually talked with that staff member and they had said, I'm having a hard time getting here on time because of, X, Y, and Z. And I said, totally fine. How about like you get here when you get here, I'll get everything started. And then they can, they said they could take all of the belongings and take them inside at the end. And I would just go when we'd finished up with the students. And I was like, great, sounds good. We figured that out. Well, come to find out that our boss was the one that was noticing that they were not there.
Got it. Had nothing to do with you.
It had nothing to do with me. And this person would, I could tell that they were upset with me and I didn't know why. And it kind of circled back around through the grapevine of this reason why they were upset with me.
Yeah. I think that goes to direct conversations though, right? Like you said earlier. And I think when you said that that's something you struggle with, I don't think you're alone. I think a lot of us struggle with that. And truthfully, I think that's what's made, again, I don't know, to talk about myself, but like, I think that's what's made my career go is my willingness to be direct, like to say to an administrator, I'll be in a seminar, I'll look right at the administrator and say, do you have a referral form at your school? And they always say, yeah. And I say, does it have a spot on it that asks what the adult did wrong? And they say no. And I say, what about a spot that asks what the adult could do differently next time? And they say no. And I'm like, right, then throw your referral form in the garbage. Because if you don't have spots for that, right, it doesn't matter what else you put. There has to be self-reflection in there, but it's that willingness to just boom, say what you say. And the reason I'm willing to do that is because I don't want to waste people's time, right? I don't want there to be those miscommunications where you were thinking that I was thinking one thing. No, I'm going to tell you what I'm thinking. And then you tell me what you're thinking. And then we'll shake hands and we'll be as good of friends after as we were. But no taking it personally. I think sometimes teachers take things personally with kids. I think they also take it personally with each other. And that's something to avoid.
Oh, definitely. And I love what you said. It's like, and it's not those referral forms, like that reflection of what could have the educator done differently. And it's not a gotcha moment. I think, and Jimmy Cassis talks about this in Culturize, it's not a gotcha moment. It's a, I got you. So it's a, let's reflect on, hey, this didn't work for that student. And obviously it continued to escalate them or it didn't de-escalate them. And so are there ways that we can talk about how we can work differently with that student or try a different tactic? Because obviously the first one didn't work. So yeah, those direct and I ended up having to approach that staff member and have a direct conversation with them. And I was so uncomfortable because I was like, I feel like you're mad at me and I don't quite know. And I would love to clear the air. And
yeah, I think on a broader level though, for our conversation, I think that's an important thing for teachers to realize with kids, right? And for teachers to teach kids how to do, right? To say to a kid, listen, bud, like if you're upset with me or you don't like the way I'm doing something, don't complain to your friend. And actually, one of the things I used to say to my students, right? So to my students, I would say to them, listen, at certain points of the year, I'd say, listen, I've been your teacher now for a week, for 3 weeks, for a month, for 4 months. And I hope you're enjoying yourself. And so I would say to them, there's 2 things that I want to have happen when I'm in front of any classroom. Thing number 1 is that you're learning a lot, right? That's the most important thing. Thing number 2, and this is almost like 1 and 1A, not really 1 and 2, but thing 1A is I want you to be enjoying yourself while you're learning. So number 1 is learning a lot. And number 2 is enjoying yourself. And then I would say to the kids, if either one of those 2 things are not happening for you, right? If they're not happening for you, it's not okay with me for you to complain to your parents, for you to complain to your friends, for you to complain to my administrators about what you don't like. Not until you come and talk to me first. See, my door is always open for you to tell me how I can become a better teacher for you. If I don't hear from you, if you don't come to me, then I will trust that those 2 things are happening for you. Sound good? But it was always that door is open for you to make me better. And I think that's one of the problems in education is very much a top-down evaluation system, right? Superintendents evaluate assistants, they evaluate principals, principals evaluate assistants, assistants evaluate teachers, teachers evaluate kids. And I'm fine with that, but there should also be a bottom-up component, right? Shouldn't there be a component where kids evaluate their teachers and the teachers evaluate the assistant principals who evaluate their boss, who evaluate their boss, right? And that should be a part of the system, because I think that is probably the most valuable feedback that you can get as a leader, getting the feedback from the people that you lead.
Mm-hmm. Oh, those feedback loops are so important. And I was thinking, I did the same thing. In Be the Flame, I believe in chapter 2, I talk about different avenues to use in order to gather feedback from your students. Like they can be really quick check, like stickies. How do you feel? What do you wonder? What do you need? It can be in one-on-one check-ins that, or maybe in a book for a student to hand back and forth with you. And then one thing that I implemented last year, which was phenomenal and life-changing, which I wish I would have done before, was every Friday we called it the Friday check-in. And I asked them the same questions every single week. What did you do well with this week? What do you think you can improve on next week? What did you like? What did you not like? And then what feedback do you have for me? And, you know, a lot of times, you know, they could reflect in the first 2 questions, but I want to know what activities they enjoyed so that we can continue to incorporate those into the classroom. I want to know what activities or things that they did not like so that I can cut those out or figure out a way to make them better. And then feedback to me personally of like, what do you need from me to help you support you? And what I found because I also have that door open policy, but I had some introverted students, especially last year being online, it was hard, you know, going back and forth, to give them a place to give me feedback without having to approach me one-on-one. And that was just because, you know, building those relationships were so hard last year. It was hybrid when I first started this. And I had a student who wrote to me who would never have approached me one-on-one because she was new to the school. We were still getting to know each other. We had just come off virtual learning. And she said, you know, I realized that we're late to lunch by like 3 minutes. And that 3 minutes is really big because we only have 20 minutes to eat and I have to go through the lunch line. And then by the time I get my food, I only have 10 minutes to eat. And had she not told me that, like we probably would have been late every single day, but I made to make sure that I was setting alarms, making sure that we were out the door on time so that I could honor their time. If I want them to honor my time, I should 100% honor their time.
Absolutely. It's so funny that you say that, because that's my number one thing when I present at a conference, when I speak at a school. My number one thing when I go in is thinking their time is the most important thing in the entire world right now. How do I not waste it for the next hour and a half? Right? I'm about to give this presentation. I have to be more entertaining than any other place that these people could be right now because their time matters that much. And I think though that's a great concept, because when you value people's time, right, it makes people want to work for you. And I used to say it to my students all the time. I would say, listen, I know you guys don't love homework. I know you don't want homework a lot of the time, but understand that when I give you homework, I promise you it's never to waste your time. Never. Like you might not understand why I'm giving you this homework and you might want to ask me why, but I promise you I will never give you homework just so you're not playing video games tonight. I will never do that to you, right? And I always did that because in my mind, I thought, okay, a lot of these kids have, 4 or 5 teachers, in a day. They were middle school and high school at the time. And, they have 4 or 5 teachers in a day. They're not going to do everybody's homework, right? Like if they get homework in 5 subject areas, they're not going to do it all. So I always think, well, how do I get myself to the top of the list? I'd rather have them do mine. I guess that's selfish than yours, right? But like, how do I get it? And that was how I did it. So now the kids at home and they're like, well, I got all this homework. I'm exhausted. I'm not going to do all of it. Well, what should I do? Well, Mr. Mendler, he always tells us how he values our time. And he always tells us how we might not understand why we have to do it, but it's not to waste our time. And I always felt like that was the thing that put kids over the top. And the other thing that you said that reminded me of something was the teacher that I used to work with who used to do a 4-question quiz with the kids. And I love this. So she would gear up like they were going to take a regular test. Like she would say, okay, everyone take out your, and then, how there's certain weeks where you're going to do a test or a quiz, but your kids do so well during the week that you kind of want to reward them. And she would say at the last second, she would say, you know what? It's just going to be 4 questions. Oh, I thought it was going to be 25. Yeah, it's just going to be 4. Okay. And here's the 4. Ready? And it counted as regular quiz grade. Questions 1 and 2, she would say, what are the 2 best things about me as a teacher? What are 2 things about me as a teacher that you really like? Like, if you could take 2 things off me and place them on someone else that you don't like, what would they be? And questions 3 and 4, what are 2 things about me as a teacher that you don't like? What are 2 things about me as a teacher that if you could press a button on me and change any 2 things, what would they be and why, right? And the kids had to do it, right? And it would be funny because, well, her name was Laura. Miss Laura, we love you. You're the greatest teacher ever. She'd say, great, I guess you'll get a 50% on the quiz, right? Miss Laura, we hate you. You're the worst teacher ever. Great, I guess you'll get a 50% on the quiz. Because her whole mindset was, no matter how much you love someone, there's always 2 things they can improve upon. And no matter how much you dislike someone, if you look hard enough, there's always 2 things you can find that you like, right? And it was a fascinating thing to watch and then to read the answers. And what was cool about the answers was you would see a pattern develop, right? Like, and I always say this to teachers, like, if you do this, okay, do questions 1 and 2 on one side of a note card and 3 and 4 on the other side, because like questions 1 and 2 are awesome, right? Like you'll go home and like, whatever, have your wine or whatever you do, right? And you read them, you're like, oh, I didn't realize, because kids will tell you do stuff that you don't realize you do, right? Which is cool. And then questions 3 and 4, what I tell them is line those up and just rip through them as fast as you can. Like, and all you're looking for is a pattern. Do 10, 15, 20 kids, homework. Okay. Out of 30 note cards here, 27 of them say the word homework for question number 4. That's something I probably need to look at. Is there something going on with my homework that's making 27 kids put that word for something they don't like about me? And that's what can really kind of separate the things that you need to focus on versus the things that people just want to complain about.
Oh, definitely. I love that, because it is there is always something that we can improve on. And
always.
I love the 2 things because it encourages them to not only just say homework, but like, what's something about my practice you don't like? Maybe it's that the bell rings and I'm still talking 30 seconds after the bell rings and you're ready to roll. Maybe it's that, I have a hard time with, I don't know, time management, and you're like, I'm taking too much time at the beginning of the class period and it's not giving you enough work time. Like there's so much that we can shift as educators that we don't even realize until we get feedback from our students.
Totally with you. So I always like to wrap up these by asking every guest, is there anything that you would like to leave people with, any bit of knowledge or information, and then promote yourself? How can people find your work and your stuff and your book and everything like that?
Definitely. Thank you. So I feel like what I want to leave people with is like culture before content. Relationships are the foundation. And you said, I was thinking about this. You said relationships are kind of like the hot sauce. Like you can add it to everything and it's going to be great. I think it's a little bit of both the hot sauce and the plate. Like you need to have the plate in order to have everything else on top of it. And then you continue it with the hot sauce, right? It's never ending. And your hot sauce is never ending because you always want more.
It's true. No matter how much I have, I always can use another bottle. I don't think I have one from Colorado though. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. I'll have to look into if there's any really good Colorado brands that you should look into.
My favorite hot sauce that I have on the bottle, it says it's called Ass in the Tub. And it's this like this really big lady, and she's like and her butt, it's like on fire, and it's in the tub, and that's the name of the hot sauce. That's what I try to do. I try to find like the craziest looking ones, and it's pretty funny. But anyway.
I love that. Well, and it's like buying a good bottle of wine. I usually buy it for the label, not necessarily for.
There you go.
What does it look like? It must be good. So build those relationships, and it's something that pays out dividends throughout the year because you are using your time more efficiently when you have relationships rather than managing behaviors.
Yeah.
And it's embedding social emotional learning, relationships, and academics all together. It's not just one more thing.
Right.
It's everything together. And so if I could leave educators with that would be the most important. And if they want to connect and hang out a little bit more, I'm on Instagram at Fantastically Fourth. Twitter is Saeed, Saeed _Shane. And then I'm on TikTok, not super often, but it's the Fantastically Fourth there. And then
did someone take your name there?
they did.
No way.
I know. Oh, it was one of those where I was like,
that's dirty.
Oh, that hurts.
Right. That's dirty. Oof. All right.
You can find my book on Amazon. So Be the Flame on Amazon.
Be the Flame on Amazon. And one last thing I just wanted to say real quick. I know we got to wrap up, but I think that thing with relationships, I think sometimes what happens is the mindset becomes, right, I have to do one or the other, right? I have to teach math or I have to build relationships, right? And I guess my bigger point is it doesn't have to be one or the other, right? Like you can teach math and build relationships at the same time, right? Tom Brady was 34 for 45 for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns. What's his completion percentage and how do you figure that out? You watched the game last night, right? Didn't you? See how I can bring math in to the connection versus it having to be one or the other. And I think that's really the focal point. Be the Flame, Fantastically Fourth on Instagram. You can find her everywhere. Shane Saeed, it was awesome talking to you. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much, Brian, for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, everybody else, don't forget to rate, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to download. I'll be back with you same time next week. Until then, I say peace. I'm out of here.